7th graders, it's Mrs. Tromley again with lesson 8-2, and today's lesson is all about histograms. And you might be thinking, I learned about bar graphs a long time ago. Well, histogram's a little bit different. I look at it as a long lost cousin of the bar graph. It's like a bar graph, and it shows the frequency of data values in intervals of the same size, but unlike a bar graph, the bars in a histogram touch because the intervals are number ranges, not categories. So here's an example. Here it says theme park admission. Over here there's a number of parks, and down here, instead of having categories, there are number ranges. That's one way you can tell the difference between a histogram and a bar graph. There aren't categories, there are ranges. And when I say they touch, because of the ranges, I mean this one ends off at 14 and the next value is 15. There's not going to be a space between 14 and 15. And this one ends in 22 and the next one starts at 23, so no spaces. Here it looks like there's a space. There's really not. There are just no values in that category. And then we have our last category here. So just like a bar graph, the height of each bar represents the frequencies of the value in the range. So this tells me if the cost of theme park admission, $7 to $14, there are, it looks like about 5 parks that have that cost. And there are about 7 parks that have the $15 to $22 cost. And there are 4 parks that would have the $23 to $30 cost. So this tells me how many people fit into each category, or how many parks, I guess, in this case. So you're going to learn how to make a histogram, and you're also going to practice interpreting a histogram, kind of like stem and leaf plots where we have to interpret. So I give you the steps right here. They're listed out into how you're supposed to make one of these things, and we'll kind of just take it one step at a time. So I'm not going to have the steps up on the screen, but you have them in front of you so you can see them. All right, so if you look at step 1, it says to label the axes. This frequency table right here shows a number of pairs of shoes that each person in a class owns, and this is just made up data. It's not really. Maybe we'll take a little survey and find out how many shoes each person owns. At one point I had 64. I know, it's bad. 64 pairs of shoes. No more. No more. Alright, so anyhow, here's the number of pairs of shoes they own, and here's how many people fit into that category. So 11 people own 1 to 3 pairs, 4 people own 4 to 6 pairs, 7 to 9 pairs, nobody. 10 to 12 pairs, there were 3 people, and 13 to 15 pairs of shoes, there were 6 people that were surveyed that said that's how many I have. So we're going to label our axes, and if you recall, when you have a data table set up vertically like this, the first column represents the x-axis and the second column represents the y-axis. And on a graph, the horizontal axis is the x and the vertical axis is the y. Do you feel like you're in science class? They're connected, I know. So if this goes on the x-axis, when I ask you to label it, it means take this heading and write it down here. We have pairs of shoes. And then we have frequency, so that's the heading we're going to use for the y. And does it matter if you mix them up? Yes, it does. So make sure you put the x on the x-axis and the y on the y. There's that independent data and the dependent. The dependent data is the data that we count. We counted how many people had this number of shoes. Okay, step 2, list the intervals on the x-axis. So if we had a bar graph, we would have a bunch of categories here, and you'd write them down here. Now we have a bunch of number ranges that I want you to list down here. So it looks like we have 5 categories. I kind of want to make each bar the same size. So just do your best. We'll draw some lines here to space out our bars. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It doesn't matter to me if you skip a space here. I usually just start right up against the axis. Okay, so 1 to 3, that's my first range. And the second one is 4 to 6. So this is just like labeling my categories, except I'm putting number ranges because that's a histogram. It has number ranges. Okay. The next step says, find the maximum frequency and use that to assist you in labeling the y-axis scale. I have a lot of people that will just look at the frequencies and just write them down here and say, okay, well, 0, 3, 6, 4, 11. When you have your y number scale, same with your x, you can't just count by a bunch of random different numbers. You have to choose a number scale, choose a number to count by. So you don't have to look at every data value. Look at your highest one. I see the highest value is 11. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines to make it all the way up to 11. So a nice number to count by, you have it in your head, I would say it's 2. Hopefully that's what you said. So down here would be 0, and then I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. And now we'll be able to make it all the way up. So again, I can't just count by 3 here and then go ahead and write, 11 there and 7 here. You have to count by the same amount. So every time I'm counting by 2. Really, really important, and it's a really common error. That's why I'm talking about it over and over again. I know. Okay, last step. Draw the bar to represent the frequency of each interval. So this is just like a bar graph, but remember they get to touch. Histograms are allowed PDA. I know, there's no PDA in school except if you're a histogram. Alright, anyway, 1 to 3 pairs of shoes, we have 11. So I know that in this 1 to 3 bar, I need it to go all the way up to 11. I don't see an 11, but I know 11 is halfway between 10 and 12. So I have a ruler. If you don't, maybe hit pause right now and go grab one. Welcome back. And if you don't have a ruler, just fold a piece of paper in half, and you can use that as a nice straight edge. So I'm going to draw my line until it's about halfway between the 10 and the 12, and put my bar over the top. And there's bar number 1. All right. Now, 4 to 6, it looks like we have a frequency of 4. So I have to go up to 4. So again, I'm going to get my ruler. And this one ends right on the line. Okay. And then 7 to 9, I have 0. I'm not going to write anything. It's 0, so there's no bar there. The next one has 3, so this 10 to 12 has 3. That's halfway between the 2 and the 4. So when you get your ruler, you want to go halfway up between the 2 and the 4. I have to do it on both sides this time because the other column was a 0. And then in the 13 to 15 range, we have 6. So I need to go all the way up to 6 with this one. Draw the line across the top. And we have a histogram. I would put a title on there, maybe just pairs of shoes. That sounds good. And generally, because it's kind of hard to tell with this, does this end here or is this a line on the graph? You would do some shading. So you don't have to do anything fancy right now, but we would end up shading these bars in. Really nice and neat. Just like mine. If I was going to turn this in, it would be very nice and neat, and I would have shaded it better. But these are shaded so that you can see how high it goes up instead of just trying to guess. Does it end there or what? All right, so we know how to make one. And if you forgot, the steps are right there. You can refer right back to your notes. Steps 1 to 4 will help you out. Now take a look at the next page, interpreting them. So not only do you need to know how to make it, you have to know how to read it. And I think it's linked. If you know how to make it, then you'll know how to read it. So here's a fun little histogram on jumping jacks, the number of jumping jacks. And I didn't find how long it took these people, so I'm going to say the number of jumping jacks that people could do in 1 minute. And this is the frequency of people. So if we're looking at this, I see my ranges are 1 to 10 jumping jacks, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, 41 to 50, and 51 to 60. Notice that these are equal increments here. There's the same number of values in each range. It has to be that way. I couldn't say 11 to 20 and then here say 21 to 40 and then say 41 to 52. They have to be equal increments down here as well. So just a side note, something to know when you're making a histogram. All right, so we just need to read this thing. Letter A says, which interval contains the most data values? And when I say that word interval, that just means which number range. That's all that I mean. So the intervals on this would be these number ranges located across the bottom. So all you have to do to figure out which interval contains the most is look for the tallest bar, right? The tallest bar is right here, and I see the interval that goes along with that is 31 to 40. I'm going to go ahead and write that. It's the 31 to 40. That's the tallest range. Okay, letter B asks you, how many of the people surveyed can do more than 30? Okay, so more than 30. Is 30 more than 30? Nope. The first number that's more than 30 would be 31, right? So if you're looking at this graph, here's the 30 mark. Aren't all of those bars representative of more than 30? Yep. So there are, if I follow over, 7 people in this one, there are 4 people in this number range. And then if you follow this over, there are 2 people in this number range. So if I want to know how many people surveyed can do more than 30, all I need to do is add those 3 bars together. So you can find that by taking 7 plus 4 plus 2. And when you do that, you get 13. So 13 people surveyed can do more than 30 jumping jacks in a minute. So again, more than 30 would be those 3. These are just the ranges. They have nothing to do with how many people. To figure out how many people, I'm looking over here where it says number of people. Crazy, I know. Okay, letter C asks you, how many of the people surveyed can do at most 40 jumping jacks? So 40 is the maximum amount they can do. They can't do any more than that. So take a look. At most 40. So right here, this one ends with 40, right? The 41 to 50 and the 51 to 60 range won't be included because that's more than 40. But these values will. So the 7 people here, and then here, if I follow it over, it looks like there are 3, and here there are 4. So if I'm looking for for at most 40, that would be these 4 people, these 3 people, and those 7 people. So I'd have to take 4 plus 3 plus 7. Don't just write the answer. Write down 4 plus 3 plus 7 so you know how you got the answer. And that's 14 people. All right. Letter D says, what percent of the people surveyed can do 51 to 60 jumping jacks? Now, I'm not asking you how many. I'm asking you what percent. And to figure out a percent, you remember that percent is part divided by the whole amount times 100, right? So for example, if you got a 25 out of 30 on a quiz, to figure out your grade, you would take the 25 divided by the 30, what it's out of, and multiply by 100, correct? Same thing here. So what I need to know is how many people can do 51 to 60 jumping jacks. That's the portion of it. The whole would be how many people total were surveyed, and then I multiply that by 100. So let's take a look up here. I want to know the 51 to 60. So in the 51 to 60 category, I see there are 2 people. 2 people, so that's the part. Now, to figure out the whole amount, I need to know how many people were surveyed. That just means I need to add all of those values up. So we're going to take 4 plus 3 plus 7 plus 4 plus 2. So 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 7 is 14. 14 plus 4 is 18, and 18 plus 2 is 20. So 2 out of 20 can do 51 to 60. To make it a percent, I'm going to divide that and then multiply it by 100. So when you take 2 divided by 20 times 100, you get 10, and I'm going to put a percent sign after that because we made it a percent by multiplying it by 100. So when I ask you for a percent, you just look at what is the part, what's it out of, and multiply it by 100, just like you would on a quiz score that you got back. All right, the last part here is kind of on your own. I would like to know, because I'm a little bit curious, and I'll do this too, don't worry, it'll be fair. I want to know how many jumping jacks can you do in 60 seconds? Have somebody at home time you, and then we'll use this data tomorrow in class. If you don't have anybody there to time you, then set a timer, set your phone for a minute, and you count the number of jumping jacks you can do in 1 minute, and write that value down here so you remember and bring it to class with you tomorrow. I'll see you then.